My name is Robert Kroboth. I am currently the city's finance director. During this time of inquiry, I was the deputy business administrator for 1998 to 2007, and in 2008 became the business administrator. My role during this period, 1998 to 2008, was primarily role related to the management agreement that the city had with the Harrisburg Authority to operate the resource recovery facility until December 31st, 2006, when Kroboth Energy came in to operate the facility. At that point, the city was terminated under the management agreement. My primary responsibilities during this time period were threefold as it related to the incinerator. I helped monitor cash flow, which essentially meant processing the incinerator bills. I also helped monitor operating budgets, since the city had to operate the facility through 2007. I also provided support to the development and update of what is called the Appendix A, which is a supplement to all bond and note issuances, bond offering statements, if you will, of the Harrisburg Authority's resource recovery facility bond issues that the city guaranteed. That is essentially my role, and I'm open for whatever questions that the committee has.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
You want to start, Senator Fulmer?
Why not? No. Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Kroboth. Would you explain the guarantee fees the city received under the incinerator bonds? Who decided the city would charge such a guarantee fees? How were the amounts of the guarantee fees calculated?
The guarantee fee amounts were determined in part by the mayor and in part by whatever the projected proceeds of whatever financing was to take place. My role was to provide information to the mayor, for example, information such as current cash flow reports, or mid-year fiscal reports, or depending upon the timing, perhaps the subsequent year's budget preparation. Those guarantee fees were used then to reimburse the city for any working capital loans and advances that were provided on behalf of the resource recovery facility. And then there was a net, for example, of a 4.3 million guarantee fee for the 2003 bonds. I believe 1.5 million was for that reimbursement for advances and working capital loans, and 2.8 million was actually deposited to the city's general fund. The guarantee fees that the city did receive, net of reimbursement for loans, was actually a revenue line item in the city's general fund, and it helped to support general fund operations.
Can I interrupt here? I forgot to swear in the witness. I apologize. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, and it applies to the statements I made prior to now.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome,
you.
Senator.
Mr. Kroboth, my second question, and it'll be my last question for you. The forensic audit, page 48, talks about the 2003 quote-unquote city council fund. You were referenced in the forensic audit about the use of these monies on page 49, and I quote, Kroboth says we're going to need funds ASAP. What can you tell us about this fund? How was it set up? How much was in it? Who had access to it? How were the monies dispersed?
All right, and could I ask you could you please repeat the question one more time?
Sure, and I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sometimes I'm very fast talking, so I apologize. The forensic audit on page 48 talks about a 2003 city council fund.
Okay.
Your reference in the forensic audit about the use of these monies on page 49, and I quote a section of that, a portion of that says, and I quote, Kroboth says we are going to need funds ASAP, end of quote. My question to you is, what can you tell us about this fund? How was it set up? How much was in it? Who had access to it? How were the monies dispersed?
Okay, my recollection was that the 2003 bonds financed approximately $270,000 for this account. The account was established, I believe, under terms of the financing. The money was used entirely by Harrisburg City Council, and the amounts were divided, if I recall, equally amongst all 7 council members. The council members were to submit suggestions for the use of the money, and I believe council themselves had public hearing and reviewed the requests, and I believe they were approved by resolution of council. So the funding that was provided came into the city's general fund. It was appropriated in the city's general fund during 2004 into 2005, because that financing was later in 2003, I think. That's my recollection of how it all was received, administered, and used.
Okay, thank you for answering that, sir. I'm through.
Chairman Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Kroboth, for your testimony here today and for your time. I guess, just following from your testimony, my first question has to do with the city's general fund budgets. I guess you were finance director under Mayor Reed. I guess you retired from that, and they called you back because you pretty much knew the business well enough, or as good as anyone, and were called upon for your expertise again. But from an historical standpoint, the city's general fund budgets, how are they balanced year over year? Talk about the mix of revenues upon which you relied in that regard, and I think it's your testimony that you actually set up a guarantee fee line item as a revenue line item in your general fund budget. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, we did.
Okay, I guess I'm trying to get a handle on how he balanced these budgets year over year using what I think are one-time resources, and perhaps a dependence upon these one-time resources that would have, in my estimation, been an impetus for future borrowing.
My recollection, Senator, was that the city, indeed, we wanted to set up a line item for guarantee fees because that was the appropriate thing to do. Anything that was in excess of an advance or short-term loan would require appropriation of Harrisburg City Council. So we did set up a guarantee fee line item in the general fund. In 2003, for example, we recorded, I believe, a $2.8 million revenue in 2003. Of course, the total guarantee fee was 1.4, so the difference, I believe, was a reimbursement for working capital loans and advances that were short-term in nature to the incinerator. I also believe we had another $600,000, and I don't recall what the financing source was, in the following year, 2004, and we may have had a guarantee fee early on. But that was the last that the general fund recorded guarantee fees.
I guess I'm curious in any role you played in your capacity as finance director with respect to deliberations suggesting the debt was self-liquidating on this facility. Did you weigh in on this at all?
No, that was not my role at all.
Okay. The issues, I guess, again, sitting as finance director, the city guaranteed payment of the 1998 bonds, guaranteed the 2000 notes, guaranteed the 2002 notes, guaranteed the 2003 retrofit debt, 2003 ABC notes, the 2003 DEF bonds, and then guaranteed the Cavanta loan in 2007. Now, the city had a $64 million budget when you were in your last year, I guess, in 2009. I guess I'm wondering, sitting there as the finance director, how you would have communicated with the council and the mayor on this level of debt, on this set of taxpayers. Did it not alarm you? Did you think that this was risk worth taking by the elected officials of the city or the appointed officials of the city?
At my level, my role was to provide data. My role was to provide financial information on performance, through 2007 relative to the research recovery facility because the city operated it. My role was to monitor cash flow so that, I mean, obviously the incinerators had cash flow issues for as long as I was employed by the city of Harrisburg, and the general fund has had to, many times over those years, advance or short-term loans. So to the extent there were guarantees, fees charged, they were usually used to reimburse the city over those years for those loans. Of course, as finance director, I was concerned for the operation because the operation needed to generate revenue in order to pay its debt and in order that the city's general fund would not be impacted. So from that perspective, I was concerned. But my role was to provide data for the financial advisors and the underwriters and bond counsels to utilize that data and determine how best to proceed forward. Now, when it came to the 2003 financings and the construction project and the financings to complete the construction project, my role was very, very minimal, very minimal. Of course, we all had concerns about the facility being successful. In the end, I do recall that the bottom line to the entire financing structures and financings and refinancings that took place, that the goal, the end game, if you will, as I recall, was to make sure that we had a well-run, well-running facility so that in the end, the facility could be sold to pay off all of the debt that was incurred to get it to that point. That was the end game. But my input to that, all the way through that, was simply to provide data.
Understood. And I guess this begs one other question, and I raised this question to the mayor when he appeared before this panel in the last hearing on October 4th, is did the mayor and city council have sufficient data in order to make the judgment about the decisions that were being made with respect to these financings? And to some extent, I think there was a reliance upon your data.
Well, my data, again, was more performance data. I did not develop any data of a nature for inclusiveness into any of those 2003 or subsequent financings. I would not have known the capacity of a retrofitted facility. I mean, I was more prospective to the point that we operated the facility, but after December 31st, 2006, it was Covanta's game. I mean, we had no history under Covanta. The facility got constructed, delays in construction. Everyone relied very heavily on the engineers, the financial advisors to interpret the data that was being developed as the facility was being retrofitted and came online. So from the construction till now, I had very, very limited, except, like I said, for development of financial data, current financial data, and demographics to support the bond offering documents.
Understood.
For the financings.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome, sir.
Again, I think at the end of the day, what the evidence implies is that the financings on this were in great measure the means by which holes in the Harrisburg city budget were plugged. I think that's a fair assessment looking at, in retrospect.
There were, that I recall, one big hole, and that was in the 2003 financing, where the city was reimbursed for loans and advances and an actual $2.8 million that was plugged in as operating revenue for the general fund. That is the one that I recall.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Kroboth.
You're welcome, sir.
Mr. Kroboth, weren't you part of the financial team, though, that was working through a lot of these decisions?
I was part of the team, yes.
Because some of the correspondence I've read through emails and other memos, it appears that you did a little bit more than just provide data. I mean, you offered solutions and made recommendations to borrow more money or fill holes in the project and how funds would be handled. Isn't that a little bit more accurate?
Any recommendation I would have made would have been based on whatever current financial projection I would have had. For example, if we were to do a new money deal or a refinancing deal, Of course, my recommendation would be to make the general fund whole. That was my role. Other than that, it was decisions that the mayor would make based on professional team members that provided their input.
I agree, but I've seen correspondence to the mayor from you that was made, where you had made recommendations, and I think that's kind of the battle that we're hearing up here, is that the elected officials blame the professionals, and you're one of the professionals, so, the buck's got to stop somewhere, and we've heard that consistently from the elected folks, that they're relying on professional advice, and you're the first line of that, I think.
Sure. I mean, as
to
I
the mayor.
said, up until the point where the city operated the incinerator, of course I had input, but at the point at the point where the facility no longer was operated by the city, my role was to keep the mayor and financing team informed about what the financial liabilities were, operating liabilities of the resource recovery facility. And we monitored those well into 2008, if memory serves. But we would put together biweekly reports of all the 2006 arrearages that the resource recovery facility had, 2007, all the arrearages, and that meant health benefits, meant salaries and wages, Covanta, energy, bills for operating, debt service guarantees, and we monitored that closely 2006, 2007, well into 2008, and it was my responsibility to provide that information on a very detailed basis, on a biweekly basis, to the entire team. And that was a primary document used in determining what level of reimbursement could be supported. Now, that full level of expenditure, loans, and whatnot did not get fully reimbursed, but it was used as the basis. That is what I provided, unless you can be more specific.
Well, I have several examples here, but one would be a memo that you wrote August 9th, 2007, to Mayor Reed.
Okay.
And you talked about political considerations notwithstanding, the situation is simply this: the incinerator cannot even generate enough revenue to meet its $360,125 biweekly obligation to Covanta, evidenced by the fact that THA still owes Covanta $3.3 million. There's nothing short of a financial miracle that will change this circumstance until after the third unit is up and generating revenue. You conclude by saying, finally, to just not honor the city's guarantee fund, the Harrisburg Authority's debt service shortfall is ill-advised due to the ramifications of not being able to borrow at affordable interest rates in future years.
And I recall that memo, and that memo was based on the current financial position of the general fund and the resource recovery facility fund while we operated it. That is correct. I recall that. It's my role to provide my professional recommendation, but that's from an operating perspective as far as a financial position of the city and its ability to continue to provide working capital loans and continue to provide. By August of 2007, we would have honored our first guarantee draw, if I recall, to June 1st payment. And it looked like we were going to have to do it again September 1st, and it was in that vein that I indicated that something had to be done, because the city's general fund wasn't going to have the cash flow to support continued operations. So yes, that memo to the mayor was my recommendation based on the cash flow information that I had available to me. Of course, he's the CEO of the city, he's the elected official. He has to make the decision based on the data that I provide him, and that's what he did.
I understand that. Who advised you that the city, or maybe you made that decision on your own, that the city could recover guarantee payments from the 2007 financings before creditors or projects construction dollars, that the city took money out?
As the city's finance director, I was aware of this. I was aware that the city was on the hook to honor its guarantees to the extent the resource recovery facility could not. And along with that guarantee agreement, which is a formal document, and all of the borrowings, all the indentures, there's also a reimbursement agreement for each and every one of those bond issues. My thought process was centered completely around the reimbursement agreement. I said, if the city is in a position, we have to honor these bonds if the Harrisburg Authority can, and we actually draw on the guarantees, then the city is entitled to be reimbursed pursuant to the reimbursement agreement. And that was my argument all the way through.
So can I interrupt you here? So
Sure.
there was a reimbursement agreement, there was a guarantee agreement.
Yes, guarantee agreement and a
That-
reimbursement agreement.
That
with
was
each bond issue.
a separate document from the bond indenture.
That is correct.
Okay, I'm sorry, I just
And
wanted
it
to
was
clarify.
based on that logic that I said, well, okay, we have a situation where the general fund's running out of cash. We've done the best we could to honor the guarantees, but we're projecting under current circumstances that we're not going to be able to continue to do that unless something changed. And that was my argument at that point. I said, my logic was, and I'm not speaking as an attorney, I'm speaking as a finance director, we have a formal reimbursement agreement, why can't the city be reimbursed? That was my argument to the mayor, but from there it goes to the bond council, it goes to underwriters council, it goes to the attorneys to make a decision whether or not that can or cannot be done. I'm not an attorney, never proposed, never pretended to be. I just saw a guarantee agreement, which we honored, and a reimbursement agreement that we were looking to be made whole from. And that was my take on it. But from a legal perspective moving forward, I would have, if bond counsel or underwriter counsel, either or, would have thought that that wasn't appropriate, I couldn't imagine that the 2007 financing notes would have been allowed to occur.
On a different matter, as the finance director at that time, how involved were you with this decision about not providing a performance bond?
I was not even aware that there wasn't a performance bond until after project completion, because I was not part of the team, the construction team. I was not part of the construction decisions. I was not involved in sizing the retrofit project size or any of that. I was not aware at all that there wasn't a performance bond until well into the project financing when Kroboth went belly up, actually. So.
Okay. Yep, Senator Blake.
Just one quick follow-up, and if this is redundant, I apologize, but I'm trying to get clarity on representations made. In 2007, when that financing was taking place, there was, I guess I'm wondering the extent to which you either opined as finance director on this issue of self-liquidation and the certification by the city that this was self-liquidating debt. Did you have a role in that assessment, or was this completely done by the independent third-party advisors?
From a self-liquidating debt perspective, I would not have been, to my recollection, I would not have been the individual who opined on that.
Okay.
No.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you for your...
You're welcome, Senators.
Thank